Go ahead and open any downloadable gaming store. It can be the Nintendo eShop, PlayStation Store, Steam, even either mobile marketplace. Now take a look around. Really look, and you're bound to find a handful of horror titles. If you're able to filter it to a horror category, you will be absolutely smothered by options. You can find mobile versions of older games, remasters, remakes, things in VR, really anything. Almost anyone can make their own game now, and while that doesn't always dictate quality, it sure gives us an almost infinite number of options to choose from. There are some really incredible games made by teams of 1 or 2 people that end up getting widespread attention and critical acclaim. Writing this in 2025, and we've recently had a big couple years of remakes of some of the greatest games to ever come out in the horror genre. Dead Space, Resident Evil 4, and Silent Hill 2 all came out to critical acclaim and huge sales to scare both new players and old. It's almost too easy to get a hold of hundreds of games, new and old, thanks to the aforementioned online stores, the huge influx of remakes and remasters, companies like Night Dive Studios, or sites like Good Old Games that make it their business to bring us games of the past with updated controls and accessibility. But it wasn't always like this, and there are sadly many games that are simply lost to time. That's kind of the point of this whole, well, whatever this is and turns into. I feel that there should be a catalog of what these games are, who made them, and what sort of cultural importance they have. What inspired them, or what did they inspire in turn? What was going on in other gaming media and pop culture in general at the time of their release? Whether or not I think they are good or hold up is relevant. I'm still going to give my opinion on them, of course, but it won't be the objective truth, most of the time. Looking at the timeline of events, I've narrowed down the starting point of 1982. It has a very specific title that was released that ended up being an all-time classic, but it also had an additional 7 games worth talking about. That begs another question though, doesn't it? How do I decide what games to talk about and what games didn't make the cut? At first I was going to go strictly horror and not off the beaten path. If it was very clearly horror, it was getting covered. This was before doing the research and seeing things that I wondered if maybe they were scary to someone else even if I don't consider them horror. This opened the door to things like games based on the Predator franchise or Godzilla. I also thought about spooky games aimed at children, so things like games based on the Scooby-Doo IP will also be discussed over the years. This led to other conflicts with the Alien franchise. With the movies, the first film was firmly in the horror camp, but the others were far more on the action side of things. Terminator 2, that's Terminator as well, not specifically the second movie, but that franchise is horror first and action sci-fi after. I figure I'll discuss all of these as someone somewhere will consider them horror. The goal is to be more inclusive rather than fret and overthink about leaving things out. I'd much rather include something that is a stretch than leave out anything that someone loved and held as horror. The next question to consider is what platforms will I be using? That may sound dumb as it's a video game, so that would suggest any home computer or classic console will be covered, and yes, that's correct. But remember when I was discussing trying to include everything? Here's where I need to differ. I won't be discussing pinball horror boards in these specific years, but I'll probably make a video on those eventually. I'm also not going to discuss fan-made games or mods, things on itch.io, or mobile games because, well, those will get their own separate videos too. The tough part is going to be as we approach the current age of buying and creating, as it's going to be just a pain in the butt to sift through Steam to find the good things found buried among, well, everything else that is just a pulse with a price tag. I'll be covering everything in order of release date in the years covered, except the games that I believe deserve their own video due to their importance or influence, or honestly, if I just really like the game. Finally, my kids really got into a horror-themed game called Bendy and the Ink Machine that I thought was a lot of fun. My show on the channel I work for all about video games was a fun platform and the kids really wanted me to cover Bendy. I had it on my list of things to do, but sadly that show no longer exists, and so I told them I'd just have to make a video on it myself. The script, writing, narration, and even research are all the easier parts for me. Editing will be an adventure though, which is why I'm starting out with help. Thanks, Paul. I also really look forward to that video, as most of these will probably be aimed at that 10 to 15 minute mark. Bendy very well could be an hour-long opus, we'll see. These videos were heavily inspired by the work of Jeremy Parish and his Work series, Josh and his movie Timelines and the 80s Horror Project, and countless other gaming historians who just want to put these things out there so that we have a record. Before we get into the main course, let's take a journey into what horror gaming looked like pre-1982. There's a lot you could start with, but if you look back 10 years from our proper starting date, we have two offerings. One of them on the infant home console market and one in the arcade. The arcade would give us Killer Shark from Sega 3 years before Killer Sharks would become all the rage on screen, and even 2 years before the novel that gave us Steven Spielberg's classic. It's nice to see one of the heavy hitters of gaming give us our first subject, and Sega will pop in and out of these videos for many years. Killer Shark lets the player take control of a harpoon gun and take on various sharks. The game makes it look like the player is underwater and is a timed experience. The backgrounds change and you face slightly different sharks from time to time. While very quaint today, it was very advanced looking 53 years ago. Again, while nothing scary by today's standards, I can see the rush and feeling tense while pulling the trigger as the screen flashes and sharks react. The home market offering that year was one of the pack-in titles for the revolutionary Magnavox Odyssey. Ralph Baer out of Sanders Associates, a defense contractor, would develop the product for Magnavox, who would release the home console in September of 1972. Magnavox had been founded after a merger in 1917 in Napa, California, and would begin manufacturing radios, televisions, and even phonographs. The Odyssey is widely regarded as the first video game console and would have many of the genres we still look for today. Sports, racing, action, education, strategy, and even horror would all have titles on the now rudimentary console, and while it released at a price of what is over $700 today, it also included 20 different titles. The one we are interested today is in the horror genre, of course. Now, Haunted House isn't scary by any stretch of the imagination, but you can see what they were going for. It's a two-player game where player 1 takes the role of a clue-searching detective, and player 2 is a ghost attempting to haunt them. Like other Odyssey games, there is a special overlay for the TV set, and the two players use the included controllers. The detective looks for clues and eventually treasure while avoiding finding the ghost. When the turn ends, the players switch roles and play again. The Odyssey wasn't capable of keeping score, so it was up to the players to do so. Is it scary? No. The overlay looks like something out of a kid's book, but gives that spooky feel, and I could see having some fun with it on a dark and stormy night. The next year would give us Hunt the Wumpus, which is a text-based game that was released for PCs and ported to anything they thought they could still sell it on. They being creator and developer Gregory Yaub and publisher People's Computer Company. Yaub was unsatisfied with the games that PCC was putting out and decided to make a new one. He wrote it in BASIC and we got Hunt the Wumpus. Wumpus has players enter a cave system where they can look for the titular Wumpus. There are 20 caves total and some contain pits that are insta-death, some contain bats that will ferry you to a different randomly selected cave, and some contain nothing at all. You have a set of arrows to shoot that will travel through up to 5 caves and have a chance to hit the creature that resides somewhere in the dodecahedron. And yes, I just wanted an excuse to say dodecahedron. The game, again, you'll hear this a lot, really isn't that scary, but if you disturb the monster or run into him, he will eat you. Some people put this as more of an early entry into the adventure genre, while others give it an early survival horror credit. I think it's a bit of a stretch to label that survival horror, but I can see why the argument is made. It's almost the equivalent of an art critic finding something monumentally profound in a few simple splashes of paint on a canvas. I do think it can be lumped into the horror genre, however, with monsters in isolation, death, and dark caves. Wumpus received several sequels, ports, remakes, and is undoubtedly a legend in the industry. A quick jump to 1975 would give us Shark Jaws from another heavy hitter in Atari. Head of Atari Nolan Bushnell tried to license the mega hit Jaws, which ironically featured our earlier mentioned Killer Shark in a brief scene, but when that fell through, he created a subsidiary company called Horror Games and made the word shark itty-bitty while having jaws the size of a great white. It sold decently, and as far as I can find, had no legal complications or lawsuits from Universal. It's a simple game that has players scuba diving for fish while avoiding a shark. I do also love that this game shows up in one of the best Jaws cash-ins, Piranha, where we see our main character playing the game early on. While there is more to find in the 5 years between 1975 and 1980, the next game I want to talk about, the first of 3 from 1980, is House of Usher, released for Apple II by Crystalware. It's a top-down perspective, and the player character is controlled to move from room to room, finding treasure and avoiding attacking monsters as they go. Your stamina and timer count down fast, and stamina will drop more if you get attacked. This isn't an adaptation of the famous Poe story, and the title is merely a location to elicit a predisposition to be scared. To be fair, I don't remember the types of monsters or anyone having a gun to use while looking for treasure in the story or any of the adaptations. Mike Flanagan certainly didn't use any for his either. Crystalware only lasted from 1980 to 1982, but would fit 20 games in that span. They would all look fairly similar, but have different settings and stories. They would even release 2 additional horror titles in their final year, but more on those next time. The second 1980 game I wanted to talk about is Death Maze 5000, which is of course the sequel to Death Maze 4999. Kidding. Programmed by Frank Core Jr. and published by Med System Software, the game, also for Apple II, follows the player who is trapped in a 5-story office building looking for the exit. There are things to look at, pick up and use, and monsters to avoid. While you don't actually see the monsters, it still tends to roam the offices trying not to starve. The last of the 1980 titles, and the one with the most information, is Mystery House that we actually have a hard release date for, with it coming out on May 5th, 1980 for the Apple II. This is an advancement of what we've already seen, as well as a sign of things to come. You get locked inside a Victorian mansion and have to find your way out. We have the text controls of Wumpus, the spooky house from Haunted House, and the first-person screen of Death Maze. The game was published and developed by Online Systems, which may not sound familiar, but in 1982 they would become Sierra, which I guarantee rings a bell. If you know anything about Sierra, then you can probably guess who worked on the game. It was designed by Roberta Williams and programmed by Ken Williams. They are an institution and fairly synonymous with Sierra itself. They even had a bit of a renaissance with Colossal Cave being released in January of 2023. The game has the player locked in a mansion with 7 other people who start dying off, and it's up to you to stay alive, solve the mystery, and get out. The game was inspired by Clue and Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. It's categorized as adventure, but murder mystery is more appropriate, and well, again, not scary. This is the first one of those fringe titles I mentioned that I'd rather include than leave out. It got a re-release in 1982, but was done even better in 1989's The Colonel's Bequest, a game I have very fond memories of. Future horror games would take pieces from this and other Williams games, and it's an atmospheric and important title in the lineage of the Spookums genre. Asylum is next, and is brought to us by the same fine folks who made Death Maze 5000. Created by William Denman Jr. and released in February of 1981, Asylum takes what Death Maze tried to do and makes it better. We get full-color screens, and you can tell what the actual objects are that the character's seeing. While, again, this isn't a super scary game, the idea of being trapped in an asylum is terrifying in an existential way. The player needs to escape the titular asylum, and the entire place feels unreal in its layout, adding to the player's worry and possible actual insanity. It came out for the TRS-80 system and is a nice upgrade to Med System's previous title. While it doesn't stand out in the grand lineage of things, it's a sign of how companies and later series would use newer tech or ideas to up the ante with successive games. Finally, there is 3D Monster Maze. While sometimes credited as the first real horror game, and hopefully you've been paying attention to see that it's clearly not, it is one of the first memorable ones. It even had a port to the Android platform later on, and its developer would go on to work on games for the ZX Spectrum. The code behind it is more than I want to get into in this type of show, but it's procedurally generated, which makes it different each time you enter the maze. The player enters a carnival maze where a T-Rex is perfectly preserved, until it isn't. You need to escape the maze while also getting points for however long you survive. You are faster than the menacing dino, but if you get stuck in a dead end, that's it. The game gives you hints like Rex lies in wait, he is hunting you, Rex has seen you, and my favorite, run, he is behind you, to give you an idea of where he is. This is an early example of a ton of tropes we see. First-person gaming, a fleeing simulator where you're unable to defend yourself, and even things like a stalking tyrant we would see in Resident Evil 2 and 3 in their remakes. It still feels old by today's standards over 40 years later, but it's an incredibly important entry in a genre that would really begin to take off the following year. 3D Monster Maze is easy to get a hold of and worth playing to see where a lot of future concepts would come from. There are even more games sprinkled in the 10 years between 1972's Odyssey offering of Haunted House and 1982's landmark Atari title, but there was a reason to include the ones I did. We saw licensed games, light gun games, survival horror roots, text adventures, and even character-driven titles. All of these and more would change and mold with the times. Developers would take what they played and use ideas to create even more frightening and innovative titles. This is the genesis of horror gaming, and it's important to know what came before as we look at what was to come. Let me know in the comments if you've played any of these, and if I forgot any that you think deserve a shout out. I'm nothing if not willing to learn and keep adding to the list. The preservation of these games, even if it's just through videos discussing them and rough emulation, is critical to keeping the history of them alive for future generations. Next episode, we jump into the project proper with a few of the also-ran titles of 1982 and take a look at what was going on in that year and horror in general.